in the line of battle. You know, there's so many stories of a group of soldiers, you know, maybe in a skirmish or in the heat of battle, and the orders from their superior is to retreat or is to leave a wounded person because they're risking themselves and other servicemen and women. And some of the most heroic stories that are out there is people who go into danger to rescue, you know, a comrade who's under attack, which makes no sense, right? Like, it's exposing themselves, it's exposing other people, it's disobeying orders for which they've been trained. And yet, when it works, they have, like, fulfilled this duty to their brothers and sisters in arms, which, I mean, you can't not be moved by that.
Yeah, and I really do think that previous Hermione cared so much about obedience that she didn't think about what she wanted her duties to be. But now she is acting in accordance with the duty that she has decided for herself. There's no order that says, if your friend gets a firebolt randomly, you have to tell the authority. Like, there's no Christmas gift rule that she is following here. This is not rules. This is something else.
Exactly, because you can only follow the letter of the law so far. Duty is about the spirit of the law. It's about the gray space between, and it has to engage your heart and your brain. There isn't instructions for everything.
But don't you feel as though there are times in which all sorts of sins are sort of covered under the auspice of duty?
Totally. Actually, I was thinking of that as we were reading this chapter, because we start to see here a sort of intergenerational revenge story. It just reminded me of the Greek tragedies. Harry is learning about his parents, he's learning about Sirius, and he feels like he wants to avenge his parents by killing Sirius. And it's interesting because Harry at this point is still quite young, and someone says, well, you're not going to go out and kill Sirius, are you? And it says something like, Harry didn't know what he wanted to do. So there's this sense of, I want to do something bad, like he has to pay for what he did, but he hasn't consciously made that step to say, I want to kill this person, which is a big step to take. And so I feel like he is being compelled by a sense of duty to mortally wound someone else. And I feel like here duty is pushing Harry in a dangerous direction, right?
Right, it doesn't even feel like a responsibility or obedience or anything else. It's only a sense of duty, of like protecting the reputation or something ephemeral like that about someone you love.
Right, it feels like your love is at stake. Like, if you don't do this thing, it says that you didn't love the person, which, that can't be right. I mean, I understand it, but like...
No, and I often feel like it's a similar situation to one that we see ourselves in now, which is that Harry might feel the need to avenge his parents' deaths, but I don't feel as though his parents would be like, yes, go, right? Like, I feel like it's often not what the victims would actually want done in their names. Right? There's still this desire to avenge.
Right, and I think it's wrapped up in how it looks to other people. I mean, we touched on this in the last episode, that idea of that kind of fragile masculinity beginning to emerge for Harry. You know, what is Malfoy going to say? Is he going to look weak if he doesn't? Because that's what Malfoy taunts him earlier in the book. He says, you know, I'd want revenge if I was you, right? He's already being pushed in that direction.
Baited, yeah.
He's being baited, yeah.
There's a moment that I'm having a hard time with, and it might just be that we don't have quite enough information, but in this chapter, we find out that Hagrid got a letter from the school governor saying that he is not going to be in trouble for what happened with Buckbeak and Draco, but that Buckbeak is going to be put on trial for his crimes. And obviously, Hagrid, being Hagrid, is distraught over this. And Ron, Harry, and Hermione are like, don't worry, we'll mount a good defense for Buckbeak. And Hagrid says, you don't understand, it won't matter. The Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Animals is all in Malfoy's pocket. And I'm guessing there's money involved here, but this is clearly like a subcommittee in the government, and I understand that level of corruption, but I just don't understand where their sense of duty is. Mostly I'm incredulous.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's absurd. Like, they are totally failing in their duty. They've been so easily swayed by Lucius, who at this point, yes, is rich, yes, is powerful, but like, he's not as powerful as the Minister of Magic at this point, right? Dumbledore certainly has more power over him.
Why isn't Malfoy disgraced? He was a follower of you-know-who.
Right. Well, this is the thing. I feel like People are hiding behind a kind of institutional mask, right? There's zero courage. Like, even for Malfoy, why is he picking this fight? Like, is this a way to swipe at Dumbledore? I don't understand.
I feel like for Malfoy, it's racism, right? Like, he's so pure-bloody that he hates Hagrid for being half-giant. I feel it's just like, I'm in your home. And technically, this animal hurt his son.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just another case in these books of an institution failing to maintain its duty. And it's selfishness and some combination of fear and, you know, money reward that is being given to sway these votes on this committee. But, my gosh, we need better committee members in the Wizarding World.
And I just don't understand how they're not ashamed. I mean, like, even Hagrid knows that this committee is completely corrupt.
Can't we take it to some sort of internal review or, like, even the press?
Right.
So there's another place where I want to go in the text, which is that the firebolt, of course, we know that it's from Sirius. And
what?
Hold your horses, people. And at this point, it's because he's a godfather, right? And we learn later that it's paying for a lot of previous presents which never arrived because he was in prison. But there is something interesting here that, you know, Sirius can't really yet love Harry, at least not in a relational way, maybe as an idea, but they haven't really spent time together, and so there's no real relationship there. So this present is being given out of duty, and I would say there's nothing wrong with that at this moment. But it made me think about, what relationships do I have which are about duty more than they are about love? And I'm looking at you, Vanessa.
Oh, I absolutely think that. And I think it's a sense of duty to James also. James was this great Quidditch player, and so he wants Harry to remain one. And it shows Sirius's sense of duty that he knows what's going on with Harry. I mean, we know that he was at the Quidditch game, so he saw for himself. Yeah, there's a real sense of responsibility for all of these different things. And certainly he loved James, which I feel like when one of your friends has a child, you love the child because they're a part of your friend.
Right, so there is a relational connection, but it's not direct, it's like indirect.
Right. But I agree with you that it's a sense of duty and a sense of like, I want to be able to do this now that I can.
It's also kind of duty to yourself in a way, because it's like, I want to be the kind of person that does this kind of thing. It's to the idealized idea of who you want to be.
Casper, just one more point before we move on that I have to make. So McGonagall, in this chapter, publicly makes fun of Sybil Trelawney. I am going to make the argument that she would not be making fun of Trelawney if there weren't students in the room in front of whom McGonagall feels as though she has to debunk these theories of death and destruction. So Trelawney walks in and is like, oh, I can't possibly sit down. I'll be the 13th person at the table, and therefore the first person who stands up is going to die. And McGonagall's like, don't worry about it. I think we can risk it. And then when Ron and Harry stand up, Trelawney is like, wait, which of the first of you stood up? And McGonagall says, I doubt it will make much difference unless a mad axeman is waiting outside the doors to slaughter the first into the entrance hall. And even Ron laughed, right? So I feel like Harry is constantly being threatened with life and death, and she feels a duty to be like, no, this woman is like torturing you with these fears. I will cut her down to size for the sake of your education.
So I had the exact opposite, because nearly all of the students are gone. I feel like McGonagall is finally releasing her like pent-up anger. She's like, listen, there's like 5 students, they'll see this, I don't care. I cannot bear this woman 1 second longer. I'm gonna cut her to shreds. Because they don't interact much, right? You know this school doesn't have a staff meeting. Like, the only time they interact is at the dinner table.
Oh yeah, they don't have like annual professional development day.
There's no assessment. It's just like some house elves in a room somewhere being like, I guess I'll give him an 8, you know. So I feel like McGonagall is like, she's like letting it rip.
Yeah, I totally disagree, because I feel like with Harry, Ron, and Hermione there are 3 Gryffindors who she's pretty close to, especially with Harry there. She even gets teary-eyed thinking about the fact that Lily and James have died earlier in this chapter. I feel like she's really holding that to her heart, and it's just like, no, Trelawney, you torture him 364 days a year, not on Christmas.
I mean, she has so many zingy one-liners. Like, I just looked at the text again right now and saw another one. McGonagall at one point puts a large spoon in the nearest tureen and then says to Sybil, "Tripe, Sybil," which of course also means like baloney, right? Like, she is just taking her for a ride.
Well, I think that it's out of a sense of duty to Harry, and you think that it's because she's finally duty-free.
Exactly. It's like a holiday. She's like, finally, I can undo my top collar and just like shake my hair down.
Oh my god, do you think her hair is down?
Oh yeah. She is like, she's in sweatpants. Next up, we have a conversation with Father Jim Martin, who is a Catholic priest, and we wanted to invite Jim on the show because he could tell us a little bit more about the Ignatian spirituality practice that we've been engaging in over the last couple of seasons. And of course, you know, as a Catholic priest, Jim uses language, especially the language of God, that might be comfortable for some of you and not so comfortable for others. So as you listen with an open heart and see what resonates for you, and hopefully we'll all learn something new about this practice that we've grown to love. So this week we're really thrilled to have Father Jim Martin join us. He is in the studio in Carnegie Hall where Jim Dale first recorded the audiobooks of Harry Potter. So Jim, you've got some hallowed ground that you're standing on, or sitting on, I guess.
I do, but don't expect all those voices.
Yeah, exactly. We'll leave that for another day. Jim, you are the editor-at-large at America Magazine. You know, you're someone who comments a lot in the media and is really an advocate, I would say, for kind of Ignatian spiritual practice in public life, as well as being a priest yourself. And so we're thrilled to have you on the show and give us a little bit of history about some of the practices that we've been doing here. So the first question I have for you is just tell us a story. How did you end up being a Catholic priest and a Jesuit?
Yeah, it's kind of a roundabout story. I'll try to make it a little less long than the Harry Potter books. Basically, I grew up in a fairly non-religious family. We were Catholic, but not super Catholic. I went to the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business, where I studied finance. We used to say finance, not finance. And got a good job with GE, General Electric, in New York City. You know, and it was very exciting. It was the early 80s, and I did everything that a young man with a lot of money in the early 80s would do.
Oh, boy.
Filling all those blanks. And, you know, I enjoyed it, but I ended up taking a job with GE Capital, their financial services arm, in Connecticut, and just found that that really wasn't my vocation. And, you know, while business is a great vocation for a lot of people, I just felt like a square peg in a round hole. Didn't know what to do, didn't know, you know, how to kind of escape. Until one night I came home and turned on the TV and saw a documentary about Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk, I'm sure you guys know. And something about the documentary and the look on his face and the idea of monastic life really called to me. And I started reading his book, The Seven-Story Mountain, his autobiography. And that led me to lots of his other books. And to really start to think, you know, wow, this sounds like a really sort of appealing, romantic, beautiful way to live, although I didn't know anything about, you know, anything about
Looks good on the outside, right?
Yeah. I never set foot in a monastery for that matter. And I ended up going to my parish priest and saying, I think I want to be a priest. And he said, well, you know, contact the local diocese. I said, sure. And he said, almost as an afterthought, you might want to contact the Jesuits, who are up the street at Fairfield University, not too far from where you guys are. And I met the Jesuits and just loved it, you know, just kind of clicked. You know, make a long story very short, applied and got in and left GE, and best decision I ever made.
Is that a common reason that people leave GE to go become a Jesuit priest?
Yes, I think 50% of the people who leave GE end up in religious orders.
Wow, that's higher. I was going to guess 35.
That's right. Yes, one is generally surprised by that figure. No, I mean, people at GE thought I was crazy, and I mean crazy, not, you know, where you're a little nuts. They actually thought I was insane. And I remember one of the great quotes was one of my best friends, this guy named Chris, and we're still good friends. He was a year or two older than I was, and I told him what I was doing, and he said, I think you need to see a therapist. And I said, I am seeing a therapist. And he said, I think you need to see another therapist. So no, people thought I was nuts. My family thought I was nuts, and I really didn't share anything about this process or this journey or discernment with them, and so why wouldn't they think I was nuts? And it took a couple of years before people really kind of got what I was doing.
Right. And Jim, I mean, you became a priest. You entered the Jesuit life. You've become a wonderful writer. A number of books: Jesus, A Pilgrimage, The Jesuit Guide to Almost Everything, which I started last week and very much enjoying. 7 Last Words. All sorts of wonderful books and articles in popular press as well. Can you tell us, what do you love about being a Jesuit? What about it really works for you?
Oh, that's a great question. I love the spirituality, which can be encapsulated in the phrase "finding God in all things." That's so liberating. I love the prayer. I love my relationship with God. But at a more, I would say, daily level, I love my Jesuit brothers. That's one thing they don't tell you when you enter the novitiate. I mean, I have many close friends who are Jesuits, and it is like having brothers, where there's 17,000 Jesuits, but that's beautiful, and I love the work. I mean, I love my job. I work at America, which is a Catholic magazine. As you say, I write books. I do speaking gigs. I work with the media. I love it.
You get to be on podcasts about Harry Potter. I mean, that is the life. I get to be on, which is why I left GE. But no, I mean, exactly. Doing this kind of stuff is fun, and that I love. So, but I would say spirituality, the work, and really my Jesuit brothers, who I really love a lot. Tell us more about that idea of finding God in everything, because I think that's something, the practice that we have of reading this book is really to try and find, the deeper meaning, the deeper connection within this story, and I'm curious how that has played out for you in your own spirituality. Like, where have you ended up finding that kind of piece of God in the everyday?
Yeah, well, finding God in all things, and I can use the Harry Potter books as an example. Finding God in all things means that you can experience God, or one can experience God, not simply within the walls of a church or reading the Bible or sitting down and praying. St. Ignatius's, I say, main insight, and he's not the first one to think it, but he was one to sort of popularize it, is that God is inviting us to encounter God's self, himself, herself, at every moment of the day, through relationships and work, through nature, music, reading. And so the whole world becomes this kind of sacrament, through which you can experience God. And there are different ways of talking about that. Ignatius talks about being a contemplative in action, having a kind of contemplative stance in a very busy life. But, let's take Harry Potter. I mean, I'm a big fan of the books, and, let's say that you're someone who reads the books and is a big fan, and who sees in that story this great battle between light and dark, and who takes inspiration in the character of Harry Potter and his friends, and who takes inspiration from the fact that he sort of puts up with struggles and really has to discern and has to kind of, go on his own journey. If you were to come to me as a spiritual director and say, I really felt moved by that, I would say, hey, maybe God is speaking to you through that story, as God speaks to us through lots of stories and film and art and music and all sorts of literature. So absolutely. So can you find God in the Harry Potter novels? Absolutely. And that's where, if you're someone who is of that bent, who is perhaps, say, introspective and likes books, that's where God's going to meet you. You might be someone who is an extrovert, and God meets you more through relationships and going out with friends and things like that. The two aren't exclusive, of course, but we can say that in all of those things, God can be found, and that's Ignatius's great insight, and that's what really helps to kind of break open the spiritual life for so many people.
I mean, we've talked a little bit about Ignatius on the podcast, the kind of this miraculous moment post-war that Ignatius had, and the practice that he had of kind of imagining himself into the gospel stories especially. Can you tell us, what of the practice has really been formational for you personally?
Sure. I knew zero about St. Ignatius before I contacted the Jesuits. I mean, literally zero. St. Ignatius Loyola, I guess he was a saint, and I guess there's some colleges named after him, but he was a Basque, and we're talking about the 16th century, and I won't tell his whole life story.